Dorothy Jane Scott was 32 years old in the spring of 1980. She lived a quiet, deliberate life in Orange County, California, centered on her role as a mother to her young son. Her close relationship with her parents and her steady work at two small shops in Anaheim. She lived in Stanton, a short drive from her parents' home. Most of her free time was spent between work, home, and family visits. Her friends knew her as responsible and dependable, someone who could be counted on to help without hesitation. In the months before her disappearance, something began intruding into that carefully ordered life. Phone calls from a man whose voice she did not recognize. Sometimes he sounded as though he was infatuated, speaking in a way that suggested he believed there was a connection between them. Other times his words turned dark and threatening. He described what she was wearing, where she had been, and what errand she had run. These were details that could only be known by someone who was watching her closely. The unpredictability of the calls, swinging from affectionate to menacing, unnerved her. Dorothy confided in family and a few friends about the calls. She mentioned that one was particularly disturbing. He told her to go outside, and when she did, there was a single flower left on her car. This act confirmed for her that he was nearby watching. She considered carrying protection, discussed taking self-defense classes, and became more vigilant about her surroundings. But she continued to live her life. She still went to work, cared for her son, and followed her daily routines. On Wednesday, May 28, 1980, Dorothy attended an evening meeting at work. The shops where she worked, a gift shop and a head shop, were side-by-side businesses owned by the same people. The meeting itself was routine, but during it, she noticed that one of her coworkers had an angry red mark on his arm and looked ill. Concerned, she and another colleague offered to take him to the emergency room at UCI Medical Center in Orange. On the way, she stopped briefly at her parents' house to check on her son, who was staying there while she worked. At the hospital, doctors determined the coworker had been bitten by a spider and would be fine after treatment. While waiting for his prescription to be filled, the three passed the time together. Sometime before midnight, Dorothy offered to bring her car around to the exit so her coworker wouldn't have to walk far. She went to the restroom first, then headed out to the parking lot. Moments later, her car approached the exit. Its headlights were on high beam, blinding her friends as it passed them. They waved, expecting her to stop, but the vehicle sped up, took a sharp turn out of the lot, and disappeared. At first, her friends thought she might have been rushing to handle an emergency, perhaps something involving her son. But as the minutes stretched on, and she didn't return, confusion turned to concern. In the early hours of May 29th, Dorothy's white Toyota station wagon was found burning in an alley about 10 miles away from the hospital. The fire had been set intentionally, destroying much of the interior. Dorothy was nowhere to be found. Investigators began looking into her last known movements and the strange phone calls. Friends, family, and coworkers told the same story. Dorothy was private, not dating anyone, and had no known conflicts. The only troubling element in her life had been the persistent caller. Days after her disappearance, a local newspaper ran a short article about her case. Soon after, the editor received a phone call from a man claiming responsibility. He described details about the night that had not been made public, such as what she had been wearing and the reason she was at the hospital. He also claimed that Dorothy had called him from the hospital, a claim that her companions disputed, saying she had never left their company except to go to the car. The calls to Dorothy's parents resumed soon after she disappeared. The voice was the same one her mother had heard before, calm at times, cruel at others. The caller's words were brief, often cryptic, and the calls were timed for when her mother was alone. This suggested he was watching the house or knew the family's schedule. Calls would sometimes stop for weeks, then resume unexpectedly. Investigators tried to trace the calls, but in 1980, this was difficult. Without modern caller ID or cell tower data, the best they could do was attempt a manual trace, which required the caller to stay on the line long enough for operators to locate the origin. The man never did. He kept his calls short and sometimes used payphones, making it nearly impossible to catch him. Police explored several possible scenarios for what happened in the hospital parking lot. One theory was that Dorothy was confronted at her car and forced to drive away. Another possibility was that the man had hidden in or near her car and surprised her once she got inside. The way the car sped past her friends, with high beams on, suggested an intentional effort to prevent them from seeing who was driving. The burning of the vehicle added another layer. Destroying the car would erase potential evidence, fingerprints, fibers, and other trace materials. The alley where it was found was not random. It was in an area where someone familiar with the streets could quickly escape. This suggested local knowledge. 4 years later, in August 1984, a construction worker found skeletal remains off Santa Ana Canyon Road. Nearby lay the remains of a dog. With the remains were a turquoise ring and a wristwatch that had stopped around 12:30 a.m. on the night Dorothy disappeared. Dental records confirmed the remains were hers. The cause of death could not be determined due to the condition of the remains. The location of the recovery site indicated the person responsible knew the area. It was remote enough to avoid immediate discovery, but still accessible from the city. The discovery reignited the calls to Dorothy's family, showing that the caller, if he was the perpetrator, was still monitoring news about the case. The behavioral profile that emerged was of a man who had followed Dorothy for some time, watched her movements, and knew her schedule. He had enough local knowledge to move quickly between the hospital, the burn site, and the canyon. He was comfortable using the phone to exert psychological control and gain attention. The alternating nature of his calls, sometimes affectionate, sometimes threatening, suggested a desire to keep the victim and her family off balance. In today's investigative climate, the case might have been approached differently. Voice recordings could be digitally analyzed for unique patterns. Geographic profiling could narrow down the suspect's home or work base based on the locations connected to the case. Any preserved evidence could be retested for DNA. Even so, no suspect has been named publicly, and no one has been charged. The unanswered questions remain. Who was the man who called Dorothy so often? How did he know so much about her life? And why, more than 4 decades later, has he never been identified? Dorothy Jane Scott's story is remembered not for the fear that one man tried to impose on her life, but for the devotion she showed to her son, her family, and her work. The hope endures that one day new evidence or technology will lead to the answers her family and community have sought for so long. Thank you for watching Fatal Secrets of True Crime. Subscribe for more stories like this. Real crimes, hidden truths, and the secrets they tried to bury. Your support helps keep these stories alive and the pressure on for answers. Till next time, remember, every secret eventually comes to light.